All that could be heard around was the wild roar of the terrible monsters and the clanking of their dangerous weapons. And he was standing there all alone, just thinking that everyone usually has at least one talent. He just hasn't found his. Memories of being dishonored by the association swirled in his head, constantly belittling and pointing out their lack of ability and talent, and how he's suddenly and violently dumped by the girl he loves. Everything in his life is going wrong. He always thought he was a total loser himself and was angry at the whole world where fate didn't give him a chance. But he knew there were other advantages besides talent, and that was connections. His 990,000 lives had been with him and helped him. One of the spirits from his past lives gave him the ability to wield a shield. He got the ability to sword like no one else could. From the third, he gained a skill not necessary for every man, but certainly not useless. It was the ability to sing. Even his physique was the result of a past life's work. Roman Immortal Emperor, Kassashin, Shadow Master, Danzing Soul Killer Reaper, and the rest of the hundreds of thousands of spirits stood behind him with an invisible wall. And they all said it was time to win after so many attempts and failures. And if he's the one, he can defeat the orcs. Kang Hyun-jun was determined to win. He was tired of being a hunter of losers. That wasn't why he had awakened for the 100,000th time. The monster army was ready. They were shouting and clanking their weapons, eager for the battle to begin. Kang Hyun-jun resolutely rushed towards the enemies. It was now that he would decide his own fate and outcome. It was now that his adventure would begin. What happened next frightened Kang Hyun-jun. He couldn't explain why everyone had died and where those high-ranking monsters had come from. The entrance to the dungeon was closed, but he didn't want to perish here. He prayed that he would be granted incredible power. Then he would definitely have a chance. And then he heard a voice informing him that seeing his zeal for life, the past life, was able to transcend the limitations and intervene in the situation. It was a spirit named Seiden Malor, the last patron of the sword. It was he who condescended to him. Kang Hyun-jun couldn't believe how he felt. This was happening to him in real life, but exactly as he had seen in his dream. The spirit had taken up residence inside his body and was giving him strength and confidence. Something was wrong again. He heard familiar voices ordering him to wake up and get up. Had he failed again? The voices were discussing the dungeon cleanup and were unhappy that Kang Hyun-jun had escaped and also fell asleep later. The man was furious that they had spent the money and advised them to get the hell off their team. Kang Hyun-jun couldn't understand what kind of money he was talking about and asked again, but all he heard was more insults. It was explained to him that he drank their potion after being wounded. Kang Hyun-jun's only wish was to leave quickly and regain his strength. The man said that Kang Hyun-jun eventually passed out after a rock hit his head. They kept accusing him of wasting money from drinking the potion and wasting time. Their solution was not to pay him anything. Kang Hyun-jun was unhappy with the decision and thought it was even illegal because they were the ones who insisted that he provoke all those monsters. He asked to give him another chance and show what he could do, but the mentor was adamant and said that even with a simple task, Hyun-jun could not cope. They had to save his life. And after that, the young man dares to complain to the association. They won't believe him, so he'll have to leave the team. He stood there and looked at the departing team members. Anger filled his heart and thoughts. One day the world changed. Dungeon monsters and people calling themselves hunters appeared. They were assigned ranks according to their level of ability. Kang Hyun-jun was a low-ranked hunter and was treated accordingly. Over time, he had gotten used to it and hoped it would change. When he got sick, he dreamed of her image and their favorite meeting place. It was his ray of sunshine. Looking into her eyes, it didn't matter. You could take it all. Her name was Hae-jin, the dream girl. She was always by his side, his favorite person on earth. And here he was looking at her again. He wanted to apologize for the lack of time and lack of promotion as she abruptly cut him off. Hae-jin reminded me that today is their anniversary. It's been a year since they've been dating. Kang Hyun-jun didn't forget and prepared a surprise gift. He was about to hand it over as the girl interrupted him again. She asked to break up just like that. She was seeing someone else and rushing to go out with him. It seemed like a bad dream. She got up from the table and said goodbye. Hyun-jun couldn't believe what was happening. His thoughts were foggy, and he couldn't hear anything but the beating of his heart. He tried to hold her hand and stop her from talking for a minute, but she pushed him away. She said her rank is higher now. She has achieved success while he is still a talentless hunter and a pathetic man. She can't be around him. She wants nothing to do with him and asks him not to call her ever again. Kang Hyun-jun's heart was broken. He looked out the window and saw his love getting into a nearby parked car. To another. The words untalented, talentless, incapable of anything, Hunter retarded, were only on repeat in my head. He always thought that if he worked hard it would eventually pay off, but everyone just saw him as a loser. Kang Hyun-jun was sitting on the street with a glass in his hand, deep in thought, when he heard someone calling him. It was Seok-gu, the tall and successful guy he postponed meeting for a date with Hyun-jun. He texted him, and he came over. Hyun-jun was very happy to see a familiar face. He needed this now. Seok-gu cheerfully greeted his friend and asked what was wrong. Hyun-jun admitted that he was tired and couldn't get the looks of people out of his head. Everyone looked at him with disdain. Seok-gu replied that he didn't work hard enough. Han-jung was hurt to hear such words because he was almost desperate. But Seok-gu continued and pointed to the guy sitting here by the Han River, drinking soju without a snack. Seok-gu said he would buy food for him at a convenience store nearby since his friend has no money in his pocket. As he left, he advised the young man not to jump into the river because of what was happening. Han-jun replied that he was too exhausted to end his life that way. Seok-gu continued his barbed jokes towards his friend, comparing his level of work to the guy's low rank. Han-jun was offended, but he realized that there was some truth in those jokes. It was his current reality. He was haunted by his status as a loser. While he waited for Section Gu, memories took him back to the past. How he was kicked off the team in disgrace. How the girl he loved called him a laughingstock and managed to improve her rank in a year. And even though he has no talent, he tried his best to achieve something. He heard over and over again the words about breaking up. What's the point of trying? Maybe it's time to give up. As he pondered, he didn't notice someone calling him. It was a middle-aged man. Han-jun thought it was some kind of leper at first, but he even named the rank of the young man and knew that he was a hunter. Kang Hyun-jun was amazed and asked how he knew about him. The man said he saw it and also saw great potential in the young man. The elder gave him a mysterious and mystical look and asked if the guy believed in past lives. He told Han-jung that he senses within him many past lives of incredible and outstanding people, and they all have the status of the strongest. Even now he sees these spirits near the young man, and soon he will feel them and gain strength. Han-jun decided that this man was just an obsessed fanatic and didn't believe what he was told. As he left, the elder said that this was all he could tell Kang Hyun-jun for now, and that he would soon realize it himself. The old man disappeared as suddenly as he had appeared. Seok-gu came back from the store and sat down on the bench, accidentally scaring his friend with his appearance. He asked who it was, to which Hyun-jun replied that he didn't know, and asked his friend if he believed in past lives. That made Seok-gu laugh. It was getting dark and the friends were drinking soju and chatting when suddenly Hyun-jun heard a strange voice. It was saying that his past lives were following him. The voice called their names and accomplishments. He asked Seok-gu if he heard the voice. He said that if only a whimpering child. Hyun-jun decided to switch to another topic and clarified what news he had requested. After all, he was looking for a job in the squads and would accept even a porter. Seok-gu was surprised at the seriousness of that request. He didn't know his friend was really willing to do such hard work to pay the rent. On the way, Seok-gu warned that the squad was not friendly. But Hyun-jun accepted the job and was happy that his friend was working in the dungeon administration. He drove his drunk friend home. Han-jun asked for another drink, but Seok-gu and reminded him of his upcoming porter job. And it's tomorrow. Lastly, he asked Han-jun to keep in touch, and he would call and tell him the time. Han-jun thanked his friend again. As he opened the front door, he thought about the fact that he only had one friend, but the best. As he walked into the apartment, he thought. He'd probably be labeled a loser at work like most people, but he'd give it his best shot and do great. A moment later, Han-jun found himself in an unfamiliar place. It definitely wasn't his apartment. A spirit in armor appeared behind him and said he was happy to see Han Jung. Han Jung didn't understand how he knew his name, just like he didn't know where he was. A knight in armor called his name. It was Korsago's shield of justice defending the northern part of the kingdom, and one of Hyun Jun's past lives. He stood right in front of him, manly and warlike. It was incredible. His past life. How is that even possible? But then he remembered the words of a man he didn't know. Could it be true? And he was looking at one of the strongest. Korsago said that he must now put his will into Hyun Jun's body, even if he was torn into thousands of pieces by his weapon. Han Jun wanted to know more about it. Is this his past life? So many questions. But that only enraged the protector of the northern kingdom. He threatened to kill the boy if he brought their honor into disrepute. Korsago launched his weapon, and that weapon shot through the air and flew straight at Han Jung. The spearhead stabbed into the young man's body. The pain was infernal, and he cried out. He was squirming and moaning in pain, and Korsago only smirked and called him pathetic. Han Jun saw himself bleeding and wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. Korsago only reiterated that this is not the kind of pain or thoughts that should torment a young man. And as long as he is here, he will not die. So there is no need to be afraid. Suddenly, the wounds in his body began to heal and disappear as if they had never existed. Han Jun was healed. And what does Korsago mean about not being able to die here? He'll be tortured here forever. He has to run. He suddenly saw a door like the one in his apartment. It was always there, but he didn't see it. He had to escape. It was as if Korsago had read Hyun Jun's thoughts and said that because of his own lack of strength and spirit, he was always running away and wasn't even able to accept death. While Han Jun was trying to open the door, Korsago spoke after him. He was dissatisfied with the young man's behavior. He wished he could be the vessel of his strength and accomplishments. Hyun Jun felt pain in his heart at the memory of his past life where he and his family were still together. He suffered. But apart from suffering, he always had hope. Even if he had no talent, he hoped that one day things would change. But Korsago didn't care about his feelings. He needed the inner strength and will of a young man. Hyun Jun was angry at Korsago's words because he didn't know what it was like to be powerless, but he didn't give up. How dare he speak to him like that? In fact, that's what Korsago wanted. He finally saw the fire and fearlessness in the boy's eyes. Now he's ready to accept his past life, and will, so that no one can take anything away from him anymore, so that Kang Hyun Jun can finally climb to the top. The voices of past lives began to echo around him. Sidon Miller, Hope Romanoy, Siren Hannah Happin's Pantheon, Hella Canmus, and others congratulated the hero. All the past lives have sent their congratulations and promised to help the young man. However, there will still be trials. Without them, there will be no success. Korsago said that if Han Jung wanted to gain strength, he should raise his shield and fight him. The hero hesitated. He wasn't sure if Korsago was his past life and didn't trust what he was saying all the way through. But he thought if this was his chance to get really strong, it was worth the risk. Korsago told the young man that trust is not important. What is important is to know that Han Jun is the reincarnation of all his past lives. The most important thing Han Jun must remember is that he can only use any technique once to nullify Korsago's attack. Korsago repeated it again and again. You can only use the technique against him once. Han Jun was determined. He must win. He could win. He just had to. In an instant, there was a blow. It was unexpected. Han Jun flew off to the side. He didn't even have time to adjust before he saw Korsago's weapon hit him. Korsago ordered the young man to get up and fight on. You can't let your mind cloud your judgment and surrender after only 2 attacks. Han Jun didn't know if it was real or not. He felt like he was losing his mind. How long had he been here and hanging by a thread? How many more attacks he could take? He hoped that on the 50th time he would succeed. Korsago chuckled at his inability to use his shield properly. He called the young man a weakling and said that this time he would use his weapon to do the final damage that Han Jun would not survive. Han Jun still wasn't used to the sensation in his body after another weapon pierced through. But after countless encounters with doom, he was no longer afraid of it. This time Han Jun was ready for anything. The moment Corsago attacked, he rushed forward with his shield. This time, it was different. He felt no pain and the piercing of the weapon. Mind managed to fend off the blow and block it. He won. Corsago was satisfied with his work. He explained to the guy that he used 24 combat techniques with his weapons and the ability to analyze attacks. There was no point in talking about them because Hyun-jun's body would remember them at the right moment. He would wake up and things would change. The phone rang. Seok-gu called to ask how his friend was feeling after his hangover. Hyun-jun lay in his own bed as if nothing had happened. Maybe it was a dream. Seok-gu said that the schedule was ready and asked if Hyun-jun was ready because the dungeon was a high-ranked dungeon. Hyun-jun needed money and said yes. He was ready to go there immediately, but Seok-gu promised to send the address as well as important information for a preview. Hyun-jun promised not to be late and headed to the bathtub. Then he remembered his strange dream. There were no marks on his body, he weapons and battle with a past life named Corsago. However, he felt pain from the wounds he had inflicted. He dressed himself. The dungeon was only a 10-minute walk away. Already at the door, he saw a shield that stood against the wall near the entrance. It was the shield he got when he registered as a hunter. Was it always here? Hyun-jun hadn't seen it for a long time and thought about it again. Corsago's words from his dream came to mind, saying that if a young man wished to gain power, he should raise his shield and fight. Hyun-jun took his shield with him as he left the house, thinking that it didn't matter whether it was a dream or reality. He had work to do. 10 minutes later, he was standing at the entrance to the dungeon. It looked like he was the first to arrive, since there was no one around. He heard someone calling him and turned around. His ex-girlfriend, Hyejin, was standing in front of him. They were both very surprised to see each other. She suddenly became angry and started shouting for Hyun-jun not to follow her. She didn't understand how he was here in the first place. Before Hyejin could reply, a tall guy in expensive armor appeared and approached Hyejin. He asked what was wrong, but Hyejin just waved him away. The guy's name was Sang Chalapa. She left with him and told him to ignore Hyun-jun. He turned to Hyun-jun and asked why he was carrying such a heavy weight when he should be carrying mana crystals. Hyejin made him feel angry. He hated this guy because of Hyejin. He wanted to curse and attack him. And then an inner voice spoke. It was Hasashin the Shadow Master. He saw the growing anger and darkness in the young man and congratulated him. Hyun-jun apologized for the oversight and said that he would be a porter for the first time and did not yet know all the details of the job ahead. They came to the entrance of the dungeon. It looked creepy and dangerous. Sang Chulapa took command. He ordered everyone to line up and told everyone that he was going in first. Besides Hyejin and Hyun-jun, there were 2 other hunters at the entrance. Sang Chulapa pushed open the doors and entered, followed by the others. But Hyun-jun sensed something wrong. Something was wrong. The sensation that Hyun-jun felt was like déjà vu, bringing him back to his dream. It was the desire to fight. Something strange and terrible began to happen. Sang Chulapa was the first to scream. Then Hyejin, who was standing not far from Sang Chulapa, also heard Hyejin's scream of terror. Hyun-jun only had time to notice the flying weapon tip and shouted for everyone to dodge as best they could. Something sharp with blue flames was now flying straight at Hyun-jun, and he didn't know what to do. There was a big explosion, and pieces of earth and stones flew in different directions. You couldn't see anything. Hyun-jun heard a voice that belonged to Corsago. He was saying that the shield of justice would protect them, and as long as it was around, nothing could harm them. At this moment, Hyun-jun felt an inner strength and pointed his shield forward. He repelled the attack of the flying weapon. Everyone was choking on the dust. You couldn't see anything. Sang Chulapa asked if everyone was alive and hurt. Hyejin shouted that the porter was injured. One of the hunting team reported a direct hit and the porter may even be dead. There was no time to find out. Evil spirits started appearing from the dungeon. Sang Chulapa commanded everyone to line up and be ready for another attack. No one could understand what was going on or why the group was even attacked as soon as they entered, followed by another strong attack from the dungeon dwellers. They attacked unexpectedly. The attackers looked like skeletons with guns. Sang Chulapa was not prepared for the souls of the knights. It was necessary to fight back. One of the hunters shouted and called for an attack. There was no time to delay. He threw a flaming ball of his weapon at the skeleton and struck it dead. A battle ensued. Sangchulapa was also in the fray. He advised everyone to fight back in all ways and use everything they have. They had to act decisively and quickly or they were all going to die, and they knew it. Another attack had been repulsed and everyone needed a break. A group of hunters sat at the dungeon door and took a breather. There were casualties. Sangchulapa analyzed what was happening and could not understand how the skeleton knights could be there. They are found in dungeons of higher ranks. Hyejin assumed that it was the dungeon administration's mistake. She had heard that it had happened before. It was probably an elite dungeon whose rank was higher, and even though the porter was lucky enough to dodge the blow, it was dangerous to go any further. The group might have been punished, but it was better than all of them dying. And Hyunjun really realized that he was only lucky because the mysterious voice was helping him, and there is no guarantee that the secret patron will save the young man again. He pushed the door open, but it was locked. There was no way out of the dungeon now. Hyejin asked what was wrong. She experienced disappointment and fear at the news that the door wouldn't budge and everyone was trapped in here. Sangchulapa realized that if it's a dungeon with a locked door after entering, the only way out is to clean it out. Not a good scenario. Hyejin told Sangolpa that she was very scared. He promised to protect her from all dangers. Hyunjun stood at a distance and watched silently. He was only thinking about his girlfriend and her new boyfriend, how quickly she had him. Sangchulapa said they will clear this dungeon. Everyone needs to stay close and get some rest. They slowly made their way deeper into the dungeon. Suddenly, strange sounds were heard, and everyone stopped and froze. In the semi-darkness, it was impossible to make out who was making the sounds. The situation was getting hotter by the minute. They stared into the darkness. Suddenly, a skeleton knight came out of the darkness. It moved so fast that no one could track it. One of the group of hunters felt a strong weapon strike him. A skeleton attacked him from somewhere above. It was a lightning bolt of devastating damage. Everyone screamed at what they saw. They lost another one. Hyunjun examined the dungeon dweller and determined the status. It was a skeleton sergeant. There was another deafening scream. It was Hyejin. You couldn't see her in the dark. She scared Sangolpa. He turned around and saw her. She was crying and staring into the void. She thought they were all doomed and would die here. A minute later, another attack from the skeleton knights followed. They were advancing. Hanjun prepared to defend himself. He put his shield in front of him and tried to understand the enemy's attack technique. It seemed simple enough to him. His body and mind remembered everything. The young man fought back and fought back. He could feel how weaker and weaker his opponent was becoming and how his strength and skills were growing. And then the moment came for the decisive, crushing blow. Hyunjun had all his will in his fist. The skeleton knight didn't expect such a rebuff. His movement speed had already weakened. Henjun prepared himself and rushed forward. He masterfully and technically repelled all the pathetic last attempts of the attack. Hyejin couldn't believe her eyes. Was it really Hyejun? Hyunjun's final and fateful blow to the two opponents. The dungeon wall collapsed and he saw the light of the exit. He really could survive and win. Hyejin stood behind him and stared in surprise. She couldn't believe that the one in front of her was the same Kang Hyejun, a low-ranked hunter. Hyunjun asked how the rest of the group was doing, to which the girl replied that everyone was dead. They were the only survivors. She could not understand and asked the guy to explain how he managed to defeat such strong dungeon monsters and even alone. Hyunjun wanted the girl to think of him instead of questioning what he had done. He only told her to be glad she was alive. She held out her hand to him and apologized for her rude behavior with him in the past. She suddenly wanted their relationship back. She professed her love. However, Hyunjun didn't believe her words. He couldn't trust her anymore, and it was impossible to forget everything and get his love back, but still promised not to leave her. He knew perfectly well that her confession was just fear of being alone in the current situation, and she was only thinking of herself. They still had to get out of the dungeon, and they staggered toward the light until they found the door. Neither of them knew what was on the other side, but they both hoped it would be the end of their suffering. Kang Hyunjun pushed the door and the casement opened. Hyejin stood behind and waited. She was sure that this shield had done all the work for Hyun-jun in the dungeon, and she needed to take it away from him for her own protection. She just wanted to use Kang Hyun-jun to get out of the dungeon alive. What was their surprise when, behind the ajar door, they saw the bridge to the next door. Hyejin offered to be the first to cross the bridge to Hyejung, but he preferred to protect the girl from behind, because they could be attacked and there was no guarantee of safety. The girl insisted, and said that the monster could come out from below. Hyun-jun didn't want to argue and agreed to walk across the bridge first. It was Hyejin's cunning plan to use the guy as bait. He made the first move. Hyejin heard rocks falling down into the water. He got to the end and called the girl to follow him. He said there was no danger. She didn't know what to do and doubted if it was safe for her to go in his direction. After thinking for a while, she decided that she would just stick with Hyun-jun to get out of the dungeon. She would just have to flatter the guy a little. Hyejin crossed the bridge one step at a time. A monster with fangs like a dinosaur appeared out of the water. She cried out in terror and called out to Hyun-jin for help. The young man didn't have time to do anything. He only saw a huge, toothy shark grab Hyejin by the neck and drag her into the dark waters. The girl was begging for help. She couldn't die in this dungeon. Hyejin rushed towards the underwater monster. He wanted to help her and save her, but it was too late. The shark took Hyejin with it to the depths. There's no chance of rescue. She's definitely dead. Hyejin should have felt pity for the girl, but there was something else in his soul. He felt the presence of one of his past lives. Standing in front of another door, he realized that both Corsago and Sidon Miller believed that only moral stability and toughness were necessary for survival. He resolutely opened the door, hoping that this was the end of the dungeon. But a voice behind him reported that Hyun-jin was still innocent, and there might be some difficulties with that. The last thing the spirit of the past life said was that it would be a special pleasure to spoil the young man's humanity. But now, he must go. Kang Hyun-jun left the dungeon, but everything around him was unrecognizable and new. He wondered where he had gotten to and what this strange place of sand and rocks was. His memory was playing tricks on him again. He tried to open the door again and go back for Hyejin. He couldn't remember what had happened to her. But through a hole in the rocks, he saw skeleton knights ready to attack. Hyun-jun realized that he would have to fight and fend off blows again. He gripped his weapon tightly. This time, he was already more prepared and knew how to deal with them. He stood firmly on his feet and repelled the attacks of the dungeon monsters. The battle was in full swing. One of the monsters used a weapon to cut a lock of hair off Hyun-jun's head. Then the skeleton knight swirled above Hyun-jun's head and stabbed him in the back. The young man groaned in pain. He fell to the sand almost senseless. If he couldn't defend himself this time, lying on the ground and writhing in pain, he couldn't understand how it had come to this. The thought that everyone in that dungeon had died but him was unbearable. Meanwhile, the monsters surrounded the young man. He saw no way out. Even the entrance to the dungeon suddenly closed. And these high-ranking monsters. He couldn't figure out where they'd come from. Hyun-jun thought of the incredible strength he could have. Then he would have defeated everyone and had a chance to save himself. The young man heard a mysterious voice that said that seeing his desire to win, his past life had intervened in the situation on its own. Hyun-jun saw his image. It was Sidon Miller, the last patron of the sword. Sidon Miller's spirit was now in Hyun-jun's body, and he could feel the power he had received. The skeleton monsters started attacking again. With hissing hisses, they waved their weapons. Kang Hyun-jun's eyes were filled with rage and fierce power. He was ready to fight. He thought that these foul things couldn't handle him, and how dare they point their weapons at him. And just as he prepared to attack and readied his shield, the unthinkable happened. The monsters hissed and roared, and Hyun-jun felt a sharp burning sensation in his body. The spirit of a past life told him that they would meet again in the future and disappeared. Hyun-jun was on the ground again. His weapon and shield were lying beside him. It seemed the fight had not ended in his favor. In the stone hall, 8 people sat at a round table and were clearly arguing about something. One of them asked why the others went ahead of him. The other said it was an emergency. The third apologized for not being able to just stand there and watch. The fourth one said that he's the only one the kid needs right now because he's got a lot of training to do. The fifth, who was also at the table, was a young singer, and he asked to also come out and show their reincarnation the ability to sing. These were the heroes' past lives, and no one present was sure of Hyunjun's success. The singer suggested just giving up and singing together, because it's so much fun. One of the people at the meeting said we shouldn't ignore him and maybe we should give him a chance. Because even though he was just a child, he had a strong fighting spirit, but he didn't agree with Korsago's opinion. While the men were having a heated argument, a young girl escaped from the hall through the open door. Her name was Gorgeous Hope, and she was sure to solve all of Hyunjun's problems through music. Suddenly, she felt herself almost falling. Someone grabbed her and held her tight. It was Korsago. He walked out of the room, slamming the door behind him, saying it was his turn. Kang Hyunjun had somehow moved to another place, but unlike the past, it was a place he recognized. He looked up and saw Korsago looming over him. Past life was pleased that the guy was already there. Hyunjun asked what was going on and why he was here. He was tired and angry from the ordeal that had plagued him. But Korsago noticed that the young man was asking the wrong questions and should be asking what else Hyunjun needed to do to win. Kang Hyunjun was resentful and impatient, but he squeezed his will in his hands and asked Korsago what else he should do. Korsago replied that it was very simple. The young man must become the strongest in the world. In his opinion, it was obvious and not difficult. Unlike Hyunjung, who was always a loser and a low-ranked hunter, yes, he certainly got a little stronger after their training with Korsago. But it wasn't enough. Then Korsago struck the ground with his weapon and ordered Hyunjun to watch carefully. With lightning-fast power and speed, Korsago's weapon flew straight into the sky. Kang Hyunjun looked at it with his eyes wide open. A wide streak appeared in the sky like a bolt of lightning. Korsago cut the sky. The boy didn't understand how it was possible. What kind of power one must have. Korsago continued his valedictory speech and said that Hyunjun would be able to stand on top of the world. He handed him a fragile shining stone. It was a mana crystal that gave strength and healing. Korsago explained that this crystal was the core of the monsters, and normal humans only used it as fuel. But that's not its only purpose, and it can be used in other ways. He threw it at the skeleton. When he fell into the dungeon monster, his bones began to grow muscle and flesh and turned into a troll. Kang Hyunjun watched the whole process and didn't even try to understand anything. He only saw a green, menacing troll with a weapon in his hands. It looked like he was going to have to fight this monster. Korsago pointed out to the guy that it didn't matter who was in front of the hero. Troll monster or skeleton. He ordered Kang Hyunjun to raise his shield. Hyunjun realized that he would now have to fight an evil giant troll. Korsago said this would be the boy's second training session, and there was only one condition to fulfill. As always, it was simple. Survive. At this moment, the green verdigris soared above the ground and rushed straight at Kang Hyunjun. He remained frozen in place with his shield forward and waited for the attack. But Korsago corrected the situation and advised the guy to change his position as the current one was not favorable at all. He also advised the young man to think ahead and try to be at least one step ahead of his opponent. Kang Hyunjun had no time to think about his position. The troll swung his weapon and attacked him. The blow was so strong that Hyunjun fell to the ground with only his shield. The pain from the blows was unbearable, and Kang Hyunjun groaned and wriggled. Then it happened again, 5th time, 20th time, 50th time. Korsago continued his training, and Kang Hyunjun was unable to defeat the monster time after time. Hyunjun knew the shield technique. It needed a very strong swing to at least hurt the troll. The situation was almost hopeless from the start. He looked at the green troll, who had already prepared for another attack, and realized that he was much stronger physically than he was, and he saw how fast the enemy was changing trajectories. Kang Hyunjun realized that if he didn't defeat the monster with a single blow, he would die. But in his mind, he had some idea of repelling the enemy's attack. He may not be a Korsago, but he'll try. Gathering his strength, he jumped up and swung his shield. Kang Hyunjun, like a phoenix bird, soared above his opponent and was ready to make his strike, followed by the crack of the troll's weapon breaking and his deafening shriek. The enemy was defeated by a strong fire strike from Kang Hyunjun's shield. Corsago realized that this was the young man's victory. His training had been a success. The boy had finally defeated the monster. Hyun-jun also saw the defeated monster and realized that it was a success. He did it. He did it. He did it well. He asked Corsago why he was helping him, what purpose he was here for. Corsago just replied that the hour would come when Kang Hyun-jun would realize everything and disappeared. In the next moment, Hyun-jun was already sitting on the ground in the dungeon and couldn't remember how he had ended up here. He felt himself with his hands and found no abrasions or wounds. Even after all the past beatings, his body was intact. The pain was only reflected in the hero's memory. Then his gaze noticed a bright core lying on the sand. It was the skeleton's mana crystal. He picked it up and decided he should sell it. It's a good deal and he needs the money now. Kang Hyun-jun was already confused, but he knew he had to get out of the dungeon alive first. Walking a little ahead through the cave, he saw a door ahead that looked very much like his supervisor's office. Without thinking, he pushed open the door and stepped inside. It was quiet. He moved forward along a long corridor between tall stone columns. Everywhere was surprisingly clean. He didn't notice two evil, glowing eyes staring straight at him out of the darkness. Suddenly, he heard some noise. Small stones began to fall down onto the path like an earthquake. Out of the darkness came a huge figure of an armed skeleton dressed in armor and a cloak. He didn't look like a sergeant anymore. It was a champion skeleton with great strength and high rank in the dungeon monsters. How could the administration make such a mistake, sending a group of hunters here? There was no other way out in the current situation but to try and fend off the skeleton champion's attacks. He put his shield forward. Of course, his mind was racing with doubts as to whether he alone could defeat such a ranked opponent. There was a mysterious voice in the distance advising us not to be afraid. Hyun-jun already knew who was speaking. It was Corsago, one of his many past lives, his mentor and teacher. He was there to help again. Kang Hyun-jun felt the same surge of strength and skill as in the last fight with the troll. Corsago's defense was activated at full strength. Hyun-jun gathered himself, and with all his might, he was the first to attack the skeleton champion with his shield. The young man's technique was clearly not working, and another method had to be devised. Kang Hyun-jun decided not to fight him closely, but instead to keep his distance and wait for him to open up. In the next second, the skeleton champion tried to damage the young man, but he managed to dodge. He noticed that the radius of his attack was very large. All Hyun-jun could do at that moment was to reflect his shield, but it hit the stone pillar hard. Hyun-jun thought that it was unfair to fight such a strong monster. It was just crazy. His mana crystal was running low. He knew he wouldn't last long enough to fend off a couple or three more heavy blows. Another skeleton attack caused Hyun-jun to fall hard. He literally flew into the wall. The fight was clearly unequal. Kang Hyun-jun judged the damage to be his own demise, but managed to dodge. The skeleton champion roared with indignation. He wanted to finish off the guy who managed to dodge over and over again. Kang Hyun-jun decided to act without delay. It's now or never. He rushed forward straight at the enemy, and his shield again ignited with bright fire. As he struck, he heard the bones break. It turned out that the damage was done by one of the dungeon master's bony hands. He was screaming in anger. Unfortunately for Hyun-jun, the monster was not in pain and struck back. It was dangerous for Hyun-jun's life to prolong the fight. There was a fierce fight going on, and no one wanted to give in. All that could be heard around was the clang of weapons and the screaming of the monster. It seemed to Kang Hyun-jun that the skeleton champion was getting faster and faster in its movements and attacks. Something told Hyun-jun that he would be able to handle him. After all, training with Corsago had caused his body to feel more pain than the skeleton's blows. Kang Hyun-jun gathered his strength and struck his next blow at the monster. He howled in pain. The bones in his legs were broken, and he was losing his balance. This damage forced the skeleton to get on all fours, leaning on the remnants of bones in its arms and legs, but it was not enough to win. Hyun-jun didn't wait and struck again. It was the decisive blow. It's over. It was his victory over himself and the monster. He did it. At the same time, a man was standing on the other side of the exit talking on the phone. He saw a silhouette inside the cave entrance and reported on his cell phone that it looked like the dungeon had been cleared. Kang Hyun-jun came out, all exhausted and weary. He finally got out of there. The man was clearly expecting someone else and asked the young man where all the other hunters were. Hyun-jun replied that all the members of their group died. He was the only survivor. The man introduced himself. It was Park Jong-ho from the dungeon administration. He asked Hyun-jun to show his hunter's ID card. Hyun-jun gave him his documents. Park Jong-ho was very surprised to see Hyun-jun's lowest rank on them. Did this guy really clean up the dungeon? In the big city, life went on as usual. The evening was warm and bright. A certain man was enjoying his donut and looking carefree until he heard someone calling his name. An anxious colleague burst into the office and interrupted the manager's meal. He was furious that someone had dared to stop him from enjoying his food and being quiet. He asked a colleague what had happened, because he'd just recently sent a squad out to clean up the dungeon and it hadn't been long since they'd returned. A colleague informed the manager that there was a hunter in town who was able to reawaken. He asked a colleague how it was even possible, and he just handed him a cell phone. Someone was hanging on the wire. The administration informed the manager that a guy named Kang Hyun-jun was the only surviving low-ranked hunter who was able to clear the elite dungeon. The manager was asking if the man who had just come out of the cave could really wake up a second time. He was weak and could barely stand. Of course, they'd have to do some research to confirm that information, but the manager wanted to rest. He was sure it wasn't true. Even among the highest-ranked hunters, it was rare. The colleague wanted to object, but was interrupted by a man. He explained that reawakening was expensive, and no one would want to take on that responsibility and sent the guy off to do his job. Leaving the manager's office, the guy decided not to trust his word, but to do everything himself, and check everything. Hyun-jun woke up in his bed, opened his eyes, and immediately remembered that he had survived. He was exhausted and tired. He wanted to rest and gain strength. But at the same instant, he sensed the presence of someone else in the room. The voice of his past life greeted him again. But he didn't know who it was yet. It wasn't Korsago. Hyun-jun wanted to know why it wasn't Korsago who had appeared to him, and who this new spirit was. The past life noticed that Kang Hyun-jun might have died in the past fights, and now it doesn't matter that Korsago is gone. Hyun-jun already knew that and asked the stranger a question again. He wanted to know his name. The spirit of the past life laughed. He found the boy very amusing, and now he understood why Korsago was so interested in him. He liked the brave. He liked the brave. He said he did not regret coming to him instead of Sid Miller and introduced himself by the name Hasashin. He said he took the shortest route to the meeting. Hyun-jun asked what kind of path this was, but Hasashin didn't answer and only said that the other past lives wanted to meet the young man. Hasashin was eager to begin his lesson. He said that when the boy encountered another difficulty, his knowledge would be much more useful than the others. Hyun-jun was able to get a slight glimpse of Hasashin. He noticed the spirit's form of clothing. It was clearly a strong warrior. Hasashin said that he would aim directly at the boy's heart, and if he avoided death even once, the lesson would be over. He was interested in the boy's strength. Hyun-jun saw Hasashin's weapon and shouted. He only laughed. He explained to the guy that the stronger he got, the easier it would be to catch him doing nefarious things. He told him about the director of the Shadow Guild. Kang Hyun-jun stood in the office in front of the secretary girl and waited for his turn. The young woman was pretty but looked tired. All she wanted was to go home and rest. She asked what the young man wanted. Kang Hyun-jun held out the rattling bag on the table to her, causing the girl to look surprised and excited. In the bag were the same mana crystals that Hyun-jun had collected in the dungeon. She said it looked like the guy had cleaned out an elite dungeon. Kang Hyun-jun said that he would like to sell them and also estimate the value of his shield. She also told him that the appraisal was free and cost 1 million won. The price for the appraisal was great for Hyun-jun. The employee asked for Kang Hyun-jun's ID. He held out his hunter's license to her and she smiled. After thanking him for his cooperation and reading his name on the documents, the girl asked him to wait for a while. While Hyun-jun was sitting there waiting for information, a girl quickly called a number and said that the same Kang Hyun-jun was sitting in her office. The man in the suit sat in his chair and thought about the fact that Hae-jin had been out of contact for a long time. He didn't want to let her go to that dungeon. He summoned his employee Hyun-seok and instructed him to check and report all the information about the dungeon where Hae-jin had gone. Hyun-seok promised to look into it quickly and send a message requesting the administration. Sitting in the chair and giving orders was none other than Guild Director Young Sung-min. After a while, his co-worker Hyun-seok came back to the office. He found out. He told the director the sad news that all the hunters who entered that dungeon had died. Young Sung-min didn't believe what Hyun-seok was telling him. He got angry and was sure it was a mistake. Hyun-seok was very nervous. He was sweating, but he continued. He reported that there was one survivor. The guild director did not believe it again and asked who was the hunter who had managed to escape. Kang Hyun-jun sat waiting for the end of the evaluation as a man in a suit approached him. He recognized him. It was Park Jung-ho from the administration. He was the first person Hyun-jun saw when he came out of that dungeon. He said that there was important information for Hyun-jung, but they had to move to another place. They left the building and sat down on a bench in the park. Park Jung needed to ask Hyun-jung about the incident to complete the investigation. After finding out all the details of the event, he thanked the hunter for his help and took something out of his jacket pocket. That was the paperwork. A new hunter's license for Hyun-jung. He was being promoted to a new rank. As he walked away, he added that he thought the young man was much stronger than on these documents, but that was all he could do for now. Kang Hyun-jun sat on the bench holding the license and couldn't believe his luck. Hyun-jun thanked Park Jung for the opportunity he had been given, and they parted ways. The guild director stood looking out the window. He checked with Hyun-seok, who was still nearby, to see if the information about the survivor was correct. He instructed Hyun-seok to bring the surviving hunter to meet him. He wanted to see him in person. Kang Hyun-jun met up with his friend Seok-gu at a local establishment. He congratulated Hyun-jun on his promotion. They drank and ate and made small talk. Hyun-jun asked how he knew about the promotion. Seok-gu replied that his friend was a celebrity in the administration. He informed Hang-jun that everyone was talking about the only survivor from that elite dungeon, a low-ranking porter. Hyun-jun didn't understand what was so amazing about it, and Seok-gu told about a past incident similar to his friend's story. In general, such stories only happen to awakened hunters of the highest rank, and the most famous of them is Han Jin-woo. Han Jin-woo was the sole survivor of the dungeon and a recognized awakened hunter who later founded the Asura Supreme Guild. He was the first and only hunter of the highest rank to honor his country's guild. Hyun-jun checked with Seok-gu to see if it was correct that the guild was now called Diamond Layer instead of Asura. Seok-gu also mentioned that Han Jin-woo's rumored personality was not a pleasant one, but he was still in the guild and was being taken care of, which surprised Hyun-jun. Seok-gu asked Hyun-jun if the dungeon administration had contacted him yet. After what had happened, his friend should have gotten a special job, but Hyun-jun said he didn't get any special offer. Seok-gu mentioned the irresponsible office manager and said that usually hunters are contacted immediately. He also said that it was unfair that Hyun-jung was only promoted to the so-called C rank because the survivor Han Jin-woo immediately received an A rank license. He also reminded me that Kang Hyun-jun's life is already hard enough and he's also an orphan. Buddies were sitting at a table in the establishment talking and continuing to drink. Kang Hyun-jun suggested not to remember his unhappiness at the moment and just continue to celebrate his promotion. It was already dusk, and the streetlights were lit when the friends decided to go home and went outside. Seok-gu got into the cab that Hyun-jun had called for him and said that his friend's life would be fine now. He got into the car and drove off, leaving Kang Hyun-jun standing on the side of the road. Hyun-jun walked home and only dreamed of one thing right now: to rest. After walking a few blocks, Hyun-jun suddenly felt someone's invisible presence behind him. There were two of them, and they had been following him for a long time. Kang Hyun-jun asked them not to hide and show themselves to him. He wanted to know who had come to him this time. Two men came out of nowhere. They didn't look like thieves or hooligans. They looked dangerous. One of them was smoking. He made sure that Kang Hyun-jun was in front of them and ordered him to go with them. The young man didn't understand why they needed him. The man drew his weapon and threatened Hyun-jun that if he didn't get his way, he would have to use force. For a moment, Hyun-jun thought he was in some kind of spatial pocket. He didn't want to fight, so he said he would go with them. The bald man with the cigarette replied that this was what he expected from the guy and that he was thinking straight. Kang Hyun-jun knew it was just a trick. He couldn't just say no right away. He was smarter than those assholes. He's already decided how to deal with those two. They made a huge mistake bothering Hyun-jun. One of the men's name was Jong-ho, the other was Hen, and they had no choice but to drag the guy by force. The mercenary named Chen-ho drew his weapon and prepared to strike Kang Hyun-jun. After the attack, he looked at the guy, but he remained standing in his place without even moving. Chung-ho was sure that he had hurt him. Kang Hyun-jun only stood there full of anger and resentment, and only waited for his opponent's next move. Jong-ho tried to jab Hyun-jun and said that even though he was a low ranker, he must know a few moves and techniques. He lunged at the young man again with his weapon and tried to do more damage. This time he was sure that he had wounded Hyun-jun, but he once again just stood there and looked at him with a strange look. Chen-ho noticed the glow in Kang Hyun-jun's hands. It was impossible. He couldn't be able to do that. The mercenary named Hen also saw this and was as surprised as his partner. How could a low-ranked hunter be able to use his aura in battle? At that moment, Hyun-jun's hand went through Jong-ho's body. He cried out in surprise and pain. Chen-ho was done. He took his weapon and headed toward his partner. Hen, seeing all this, already realized that the guy in front of them was not a normal guy and prepared to attack. He believed in his superiority in martial arts and didn't want to lose. As soon as he swung his weapon, Hyun-jun seemed to split into two and was already behind Han's back. The bald-headed man couldn't think or remember when Hyun-jun had managed to move so masterfully. He realized that he was facing an experienced opponent. Hyun-jun moved quickly and attacked the most painful points. Kang Hyun-jun wanted to find out who sent these mercenaries after him and offered his life in exchange for information. But the man on his knees angrily replied that he wouldn't say anything to the guy. Kang Hyun-jun had expected such a response. He leaned his face toward the man and looked at him contemptuously. Both of them realized what kind of end awaited Hyun. It was over. Hyun-jun stood in the middle of the street over the two bodies and noticed as they began to disappear. Hasashina's darkness was covering up all evidence of the fights. Hyun-jun headed further down the road and thought that he had dealt with these men quite easily. As he was opening the door of his own apartment, Hyun-jun suddenly realized that he didn't even remember how he got there or what happened on the way home. He thought he was too drunk. He was finally lying on his cozy bed and could get some rest. It was all he had wanted for a long time. A few hours later, his cell phone rang. It was his friend Seok-gu calling. He picked up the phone while making hot ramen for lunch and asked how he'd gotten home yesterday and if he was all right. After a hot shower, Hyun-jun was in a great mood and was already looking forward to eating the wonderful soup. But that simple wish was not going to come true. Seok-gu said that he had found a new group of hunters to work with and that Hyun-jun should come immediately. Hyun-jun was furious, but there was nothing left to do but to get dressed on the fly and rush out of the house. He couldn't be late for his new job. In the hustle and bustle of packing, he almost forgot his shield, but caught up in time and took it with him. He hailed a cab and sat next to the driver, who was clearly in no hurry and driving slowly. Hye-jin was already late and was very nervous. Suddenly, there was a deafening pop right in front of the hood of the car. The car jerked and stopped. The cab driver clearly didn't expect anything like this and was in a state of deep shock. They crashed right into a pole even though the road was clear. Hyun-jun was out of his mind. He was already too late. When he got out of the cab, he wanted to run. Suddenly, in the smoke of the crash, he saw the outline of a hooded man with a staff in his hand. The more the fog cleared, the more Hyun-jin realized who it was. It was a troll, orc warlock to be exact. In front of him stood the monster that Hyun-jun had to fight back again. But what was he doing here? When the smoke cleared, Kang Hyun-jun could see the full picture that made him fearful and horrified. The orc wasn't the only one who came here. There was an army of trolls behind him. They must have opened the gate. The orc sorcerer was muttering something in an unintelligible and incomprehensible language, holding a staff in one hand and a fireball in the other. It looks like he was giving the order to attack, because the other trolls immediately began to scatter in different directions and prepare to attack. Henjun had to dodge the fireball and the attacks of the other orcs every now and then. The people from the street scattered away with cries of terror. He realized that at this rate he was going to be late for the meeting. Something had to be done. Rushing straight towards the trolls, Kang Hyun-jun decided not to wait for the strike and attacked first. In Hyun-jun's opinion, if he defeated the most important orc warlock, the others would be easy to deal with. He raised his shield and prepared to strike. Kang Hyun-jun's shield flew at the face of one of the trolls like a flash of lightning, damaging it and causing it to fall to the ground. Henjun was making his way through the darkness of the orcs towards the head sorcerer, but their numbers were huge and the battle could drag on. The orc leader stood at the back of the crowd and watched as Kang Hyun-jun destroyed his squad one by one. It wouldn't be long before he would get to him. Kang Hyun-jun finally came face to face with the troll. Their weapons clashed and both had determination in their eyes. The orc was showing his fury. Hyun-jun was not going to retreat. There was a violent clap of impact such that the fleeing passers-by turned around in horror. A battle was taking place before their eyes. The enraged troll finally lost his balance and fell to the ground. He was defeated. Kang Hyun-jun realized his next victory, but he had to hurry to his new job. He turned around and saw a tall, beautiful girl who complimented him on his skills and asked if he was a member of any guilds. She said she sees the guy's talent, and it's wrong to waste such an extraordinary ability. Kang Hyun-jun looked at her and didn't understand where she came from or what she was saying. She held out her hand with a business card in it and made an offer to join her guild. Hyun-jun couldn't really understand or answer, but the girl was in a hurry and just said that he should think about it and call her. He turned the card over, and on the back he saw the name of the guild. It was the Ace Guild, very popular and quite famous. He promised himself to think about her proposal, but for now he would still have to go to the meeting Seokgu had organized for him. As he passed a shopping center, he heard cries for help and saw people running out of there. Their faces showed panic and fear. Hyun-jun speculated that the people might have been frightened by the next monsters that opened the gate. He was thinking about what to do. On the one hand, there was a rule somewhere that hunters should intervene if a gate opened, but on the other hand, he didn't have to fight all those orcs in a row. Despite his growing strength, it was just risky. The words of Seokgu, who had talked about Han Jin-woo being promoted to A rank after returning from the dungeon, came to his mind. And in Hyun-jung's mind, he had a brilliant plan. If he wins, he'll be promoted like Han Jin-woo. He entered the spacious lobby of the shopping center and saw a strange picture. None of the people were there anymore, only flames of fire. The fact that there weren't any orcs here made Kang Hyun-jun very wary. He went deeper into the hall, and on the floor beneath his feet, he noticed traces of the past tragedy. But the bodies were nowhere to be found, as if someone had gotten rid of them. He wondered who could have done such a monstrous thing, but no one and nothing came to mind. Standing alone in the middle of a shopping mall, Kang Hyun-jun suddenly heard some strange sounds. It was footsteps. He turned around and saw a man holding onto his shoulder. He turned to Hengjun and advised him to leave this place quickly. It was dangerous here. He slid down the wall to the floor, writhing in pain, and said that this time the opening of the gate was very different from what the world was used to. Someone had obviously interfered. While they were talking and deciding who could help open the portal, numerous footsteps sounded. They were moving toward the man and Hyun-jun. The man called out to them, thinking that these guys were allies and had come to help. But he was wrong. They looked more like the mercenaries that Hyun-jun had already fought with recently. They had weapons in their hands. Kang Hyun-jun asked who sent them after him, but one of the group only said that he didn't need the information if he was going to die at their hands. The man sitting on the floor looked at the mercenaries and said that they were a special unit from the Echo Guild. The squad leader was not happy that they were known and ordered that no one be left alive. A fight broke out. One of the mercenaries flew up to Hengjun and threw the first hard punch. The attackers saw that he was using his aura and they could not relax. One by one, they tried to do any damage to the young man, but he dodged masterfully. Kang Hyun-jun was moving so fast that the mercenaries were getting tired of it. Their anger was expressed through attacks. The man from the special unit swung his weapon and attacked Hyun-jun from above, but he defended himself with his shield. The way Hyun-jun was able to block the blow really surprised the mercenary. He didn't expect it. They decided to attack together since it didn't work separately. Hyun-jun was ready. In one swift movement, Hyun-jun's lightning-quick shield defeated the attacker. Hyun-jun's fighting technique was fast and fought anyone who tried to attack him. A member of the group stood aside and watched his colleagues fall. The eyes were clearly filled with fear and indecision. Hyun-jun stood and waited. At last he rushed towards the young man and swung his weapon, but for him it was already a foregone conclusion. Before he could strike, he felt the tip of Hyun-jun's weapon in his body. The last one of the special team looked at Hyun-jun's actions and decided that he was a monster. A normal person couldn't do such a thing.